and welcome to the first installment of the Bub Report Sunday edition for 2021. We take this opportunity to wish you all a safe, healthy, and sober new year. In today's episode of the report, we will examine two major stories in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and its southerly neighbor Grenada. But we begin in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Last week, the Soufriere Volcano started oozing magma due to the continued occurrence of an effusive eruption that emerged in late December 2020 and bore some similarities to the 1971-72 eruption at the same site.
And the effusive eruptions, as you heard from the Seismic Research Centre, may continue. And it may end up as an explosive eruption.
Seismic and volcanic specialists at the UWI Seismic Centre in Trinidad and Tobago suggested last week that the current effusive eruption bears some, but not all, similarities to the 71-72 event. As a result of this, the residents in the northern half of the island, which also includes the country's second largest town, Georgetown, have been warned that they may expect an evacuation order within 24 to 48 hours if an explosive volcanic event were to occur.
Because of where it's happening, it's in a confined crater. And so therefore the main danger is to people who are perhaps going into the crater, which they should do, or on the summit of the volcano. So the immediate vicinity of the summit crater of La Soufriere is where the most dangerous things are.
Over in Grenada, a Christmas Eve announcement by WRB Enterprises and the Grenada Private Power Company Limited declared that it sold its majority shares in Grenlech to the Government of Grenada as part of a settlement agreement ordered by the World Bank-funded International Center for the Settlement of Investment Disputes. The ruling established that the claimant, WRB, was able to trigger a repurchase event against the Government of Grenada for breaking the terms and conditions of Section 7.9 of the 1994 Share Purchase Agreement with the then NDC administration of Sir Nicholas Brathwaite. The Share Purchase Agreement became a significant point of contention for both sides after the current administration piloted the 2016 Electricity Supply Act, which in Part 3, Number 9, Section B, states that it will, quote, give priority to issuing generation licenses to persons who will, while ensuring the safe and secure supply of electricity, generate electricity from renewable energy sources or from electric plants that would otherwise significantly reduce the cost of electricity to consumers, unquote. Following the WRB announcement, which was not preempted by any statement from the executive branch of government, a press conference was hastily called by Ministers Oliver Joseph and Gregory Bowen, himself a former manager of Grenlech, who was fired in the 1990s by the NDC administration for allegedly mismanaging the affairs of the company right before it was sold to WRB for $15 million. At the press conference, they confirmed the $60 million repurchase event, which must also include interest charges in the form of treasury bills compounded annually.
So when you have some expenditure that should have been done on capital work, and because of the lockdown and things it was not done, you have that allocation already approved by cabinet and under by the parliament, and under Parliamentary Approval Act you can move from one capital project into another.
Joining us for the Grenlech discussion are former Works Minister under the Nicholas Brathwaite NDC administration, Finsley St. Louis, Honorable Oliver Joseph, Minister of Foreign Affairs, International Business and CARICOM Affairs, and Claudette Joseph, Public Relations Officer of the current National Democratic Congress. We also welcome Dr. Urasila Joseph and Professor Richard Robertson of the UWI Seismic Research Centre in St. Augustine, Trinidad. And welcome to the Bub Report. Good morning, everyone, and I take this opportunity to welcome you to the first installment of the Bub Report for 2021. We are actually beginning very heavy because we have some very serious issues that we need to get to. Let me also apologize for the late start as we were trying to sort out some login issues for some of our guests. So I want to take this opportunity to welcome our first two guests this morning from the UWI Seismic Research Centre out there in St. Augustine, Trinidad. Professor Robertson, who incidentally is from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, as well as Dr. Joseph, Urasila Joseph, who is a volcanologist. Folks, I know that you guys are busy monitoring the current seismic activities that are taking place at the volcano in St. Vincent or there at Soufriere. Can you give us an update? Do you have boots on the ground monitoring activities at the volcano, and what can you tell us this morning?
I could actually let Professor Robertson give you the on-the-ground update.
Mm-hmm.
Right. As I do that, I'll just turn you around so that you can see where I am.
Yes.
That's the volcano there.
Okay.
So when you ask if there are boots on the ground, clearly there is.
Well, you are the boots, right?
Yeah, I'm calling from the Belmont Observatory, which is the base of operations when we monitor the volcano. So we have a team of 3 persons, say myself, and 2 electronics persons. In fact, the other 2 are I'm in the observatory building, and we're currently doing some work in the observatory. And generally, when volcanoes start popping up, what we do is that we tend to have people on the ground, and we provide advice to the authorities in real time. So I've been speaking to NEMO, I've been speaking to the Prime Minister on a daily basis, almost, both in terms of telling them what we are doing here, but also in terms of telling them what we think is happening at the volcano. So the eruption is ongoing. Effusive ejection of magma material slowly coming out is continuing. As I speak to you, I am facing the mountain because I'm looking at it constantly. There's a little bit of steam that is coming out, some very fine, mainly volcanic gases. That's normal because it's hot rock that's coming out, and as it comes out, it lets off volcanic gases, mainly water vapor, and we can see that if you're on the volcano, you can see this around it. So that's the situation. Eruption is continuing. People are still living close by. As it is now, the main danger is at the summit, and one of the things we're looking at is to see if we have enough monitoring in place so that we could tell people before something nasty happens that it's about to happen, and therefore they need to get out of the way.
Now, because in that northern area of St. Vincent, on the east coast of on the northeastern coast of St. Vincent, you have a major population center, which is Georgetown, right? The town of Georgetown. In looking at, so in comparing what is happening now to what occurred in 1971, 1972, and I believe 1979, where you actually had an explosive event, how are the two similar and how are they different? Because you made that distinction very clear, and maybe Professor Joseph can jump in as well.
Okay, well, yeah. All right, it's not Professor Richie's professor.
Okay.
Yes, but as you indicated, with the history of activity at La Soufriere in St. Vincent, it does have the capacity to demonstrate both explosive and effusive type events. And Richie actually, has experienced some of these, of course, being from St. Vincent and living through it, as well as monitoring it. So in terms of the differences, I believe in 72 was an explosive event, correct, Richie?
In 71, 72 was an effusive event. In 79 was explosive. Yeah.
It was explosive, but it ended with the effusive dome.
Yeah.
Right.
So that this time when it restarted, we're seeing an effusive start, but with the possibility that it can change at some point to explosive.
Mm-hmm.
With respect to the hazards, yes, you showed in your little introduction the hazard maps, and yes, there is a clear in the red, the red area that was on the map would be the areas that could be impacted by a large explosive event from the crater. And this is the area where people would have to be prepared to evacuate quickly if the authorities give the go ahead to do that.
But they would be depending on your expertise to make that call. Now, in the press conference that was held last week, the Prime Minister said that it will be a 24 to 48-hour period. Now, based on what we observed in Montserrat, are there any similarities to the character of what occurred in Montserrat and what is happening now?
Again, Professor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things. And just backtracking a little bit. You need to bear in mind the volcano occupies not on 1/3 of the island. So quite apart from Georgetown, which you mentioned, there's Chateaubriand, which is, if you look at the slide when I show you just now, which is the closest to the volcano. And there are also a number of villages north of Georgetown. So people actually live on the volcano. In fact, approximately, in terms of people who are in harm's way, up to about 14,000 people are in harm's way from if the volcano goes explosive. So for the last couple, since 79, and in fact within the last 10, 15, probably 20 years, we've been working very closely with the National Emergency Management Organization in terms of educating the public, in terms of making sure that people are aware of the hazard, but also making sure that the NEMO has capacity and the ability and plans and measures in place to do that. In fact, last year, as part of exercise Trade Winds, we actually did an evacuation drill of sort of simulating an eruption and what the response would be. So in terms of the authorities in St. Vincent, they're quite practiced in terms of responding to eruption. So you asked how it might have been slightly different. It's different both in terms of the kind of volcano it is. Soufriere Volcano erupts slightly different than Montserrat Volcano, but it also is different in terms of the fact that Soufriere has erupted before and that they have a lot more measures in place to respond to it. So in terms of being prepared to handle something like this, I would say that they are in a better state than say Montserrat was, because in Montserrat, they had never had an eruption before. So it's very different. In St. Vincent, they've had one explosive eruption from this volcano every 100 years or so, plus or minus still. And the last one was in 79, which was explosive, and that was followed by effusive stage. And before that, there was one in 71, 72, which was diffusive. And then there was one in 1902. So if you think of it, the people in St. Vincent, in fact, if you live in St. Vincent, you're very aware of the volcano. You're very, your eye is always out. You have a healthy respect for it, which you should, because when volcanoes erupt explosively, the most sensible thing to do is simply to move off of them, let them do their thing, and then when you're finished, you go back, which is the plan. Evacuate when it looks like it's going to erupt. So again, coming back to what you said, we hope to give the government enough warning for them to evacuate, and they need about 24 to 48 hours to get everybody out. So that's what we're working hard at. We're working hard at looking at the signals, putting in instruments to make sure that we as scientists could give them the kind of warning that they need. That's why we have a team here. So the team here will be constantly interacting with them, telling them what we think is happening, so that they could put their measures in place. And that's a work in progress.
Now, Professor Joseph or Dr. Joseph, I know that a lot of your research involves collecting samples, right? Lava samples, magma samples, things like that. What are there any differences in what you're seeing now in terms of what gases are being emitted from that site? Are you collecting data on that yet, or?
Okay, so to get any kind of type of actual rock samples or gas samples at the moment, it means you have to get up to the crater rim and inside of the crater. And with the volatility of the situation, in fact, that things could change and the length of time it would take to get into the crater, because you have to go in the crater rim and then descend, by foot. And then
by rope more than anything else. You have
by rope, okay.
It's a steep-sided crater, and you kind of rappel down on the side of the crater rim, and then enter. And that will take significant time and will put our stuff on the ground at risk. So we are trying to get helicopter support, enable in order to kind of minimize the length of time that staff will have to spend on the dome or in the crater itself. So that will then allow us to actually get closer to the dome to take samples. So at the moment, we have no physical rock samples or gas samples from the dome because
we're
of
working
travel
on,
access.
yeah, but we're working on getting to that stage. We hoping that within the next week or two, we certainly have a piece of rock, because that's the key thing. You ask how it's different. The thing with Soufriere magmas is that they don't, if you're a geologist, they don't vary that much. One tends to have a little bit more what we call silica than the other, but it generally tends to be the same. The main difference in terms of whether it's explosive or effusive to a large extent has to do with whether or not the gas that is always in the magma, how easy it comes out. So in other words, sometimes it gets stuck and it pressurizes and the pressure builds up sufficiently that it explodes. Rather than it having to do with the magma itself being fundamentally different in terms of geochemistry. So the dome in 71, 72 was pretty much similar to the dome in 79, not that much difference geochemically, but there was a difference in terms of how they interacted with water that was there, and also how much gas they had and how quickly the gas comes. So again, the gas is important. So one of the things we like to do is actually start collecting some gas. But as Dr. Joseph said, we have to factor in the risk to the staff that has to do that. And we want to minimize that, at least to make educated decision. And we're working on it, and hopefully we'll get some gas eventually, and we'll certainly get a piece of rock soon. One of the things I'm excited about, I'm a geologist too, so yeah, I'm excited about getting a piece of that rock to see exactly what it is. I think I know what it is, but I'd like to verify that, you know.
This is so exciting. As a researcher, this is not my field, but as a researcher, this sounds really exciting. Finally, folks, how does this particular event affect other seismic activity? We have Kikamjani in the confines of Grenada, and I believe we also have a volcano, is it in Martinique or Guadeloupe as well, that has been exhibiting some seismic activity. So is there any link between what is happening in St. Vincent and the other two major volcanoes in the Windward Islands?
Pat, you could go ahead with that one.
She's frozen there.
Okay, so go ahead. I'll start quickly. So the volcanoes are related to each other because they occur on the same sort of tectonic plate margin. So the process that drives volcanism is something that's called subduction, and that's related. So the fact that you have volcanoes on each island is related to the tectonic setting, the part of the world that we are in. But they're not directly related in the sense that one volcano in Martinique is physically connected to St. Vincent, right?
Right. But
it just happens that within this particular period of time, we have a lot of seismic and earthquake activity in the region. So Martinique has had seismicity, and I think there is the level of alert. I'm not sure if it's gone back down now. Pat will tell you. And also, it's still elevated, isn't it?
Yeah.
But you asked a question which is very interesting. That you asked about are the volcanoes related? But I'd ask, what happens if Soufriere moves from effusive to explosive?
Right.
What implications does that have for the region? And I think it does, because if you get an explosive, in fact, if you have an explosive eruption in Martinique or Guadeloupe, anyway, what you produce is a lot of ash. Ash goes into the atmosphere, and aviation and planes don't like ash. Planes don't get along with ash very much. So what tends to happen is that when ash gets into the atmosphere, there's a lot of concern in terms of aviation. So therefore, if you think of the region now, we fly a lot of planes to the region, a lot more than in 79. So one of the big impacts it could potentially have if you go explosive is not only on St. Vincent, but on all the islands around that fly planes through past the areas that could have ash. And that's the implication, I think, for the region in a largest way, the ash hazard.
I believe the ash hazard was also very apparent when there was a volcanic eruption in Iceland as well.
Exactly. Yes. Exactly.
And that significantly impacted air travel. I believe that was about 12 years ago.
Yes.
Because it traveled around the world in the currents, in the upper air currents. But just to add though, to Professor Robertson's information on the ash and the potential effects on the region. Now, also with respect to air traffic, yes, And then, depending on how the wind direction takes it, there's also the additional implications on things like agriculture. Certain crops and so on are sensitive to ash, such as bananas and so on, and they can unfortunately affect the production of the bananas. And other things like people who are sensitive to ash and the particles, they with respiratory challenges and so on. So that's something. And then, of course, but people closer to St. Vincent, of course, the additional factor we have breathing in the ash and its effects on the lungs, because it's silica, as Richie pointed out. So that's cement, so it can.
There's an interesting fact that when Soufriere erupts explosively, the impact of the ash is actually more widely felt than anything else. So it affects St. Vincent, but a lot of the ash goes offshore. It goes to Barbados primarily to a large extent, but it goes to the surrounding islands. So the impact that Pat is speaking about on agriculture is going to be wider than perhaps just St. Vincent. In 79, the banana crop in St. Vincent was killed. For 79, there was not, everything was trashed. Of course, the years after, the ash actually is very good. It's very good for the soil. And once it gets mixed in and weathered, it really is great. So you have a bumper crop following years. But in the particular years that sort of the first, second, and third year, it has a very negative impact. And it caused impact on the agriculture in St. Vincent in a tremendous way. And I expect it might go further afield. So the regional implications is in that light. I think
so. Wonderful. Now we have two questions before you guys leave from our viewing audience here. Bob Marisho asks, Professor Robertson, at what time would it be safe to use the geothermal properties of the area?
Well, I think geothermal is something, well, Pat could probably answer. Pat's expertise is more geothermal than me, but I'll start. But there have been attempts to tap into the geothermal here, but for various reasons it hasn't been successful so far. But I think Pat is more familiar with it than I am, so she could take it from me.
So I think with safety in mind and the location, now, as she said, there is a geothermal area on island that was already explored for its potential for use in generating electricity. However, we don't know in terms of the length of this current situation and how it can.
Okay, we lost her again.
Yeah, okay, I'll continue. But basically, one of the things is that we don't know how long, given once you get into explosive phase, is not the areas immediately. Remember, I was saying currently in this phase, it's the summit and the surrounding areas. But if it gets explosive, it becomes wider. So certainly where the geothermal plant is now, if it goes explosive, you basically have to abandon it. It becomes part of the activist area.
Okay, all right. And finally, we have another comment here from Jose Ernesto, who says, between Grenada and Carriacou, there are two underwater volcanoes, London Bridge and Upper Rock and Lee Rock, very close to Aileron. I know that there is Kickham Jenny. I've not heard of the other one.
I haven't either, so that person needs to tell us. As far as we know, and we have been involved with bathymetric cruises. These are research cruises that look at the shape of the ocean under the sea. As far as we know, the only live submarine volcano in the region is Kickham Jenny. There are a number of other seamounts all over the place. They have seamounts. In other words, if you think of it, why we have these islands has to do with volcanism. And volcanism started on the seafloor. And these seafloor volcanoes became bigger and bigger, and they became above the water, above the sea. And they became big islands. But that's the process that drives all of these islands. But I don't know of those particular ones. I'm not sure if they're confusing. There is a London Bridge, which is a piece of rock, one of these smaller islands that is close to Aileron and various like. And these were once volcanoes, but they're now dead volcanoes.
Okay. All right. This was very educational and enlightening. And I think it is important, folks, that we go to the source of the information, because one of the things that I've observed is that there has been a lot of misinformation around what is happening in Soufriere. And so let us rely on the UWI Seismic Research Centre. They have been very good and very reliable. These are the experts on what is occurring seismically in the Caribbean. And so we should rely on them first with respect to obtaining credible, accurate, and timely information. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for agreeing to appear on the Bub Report this morning, and I will be in touch.
Yeah, all right, bye-bye.
All right.
You become very serious, so I need to look at it. So it's a good
Yes.
thing to stop. Good thing
Okay.
to stop. Yeah.
All right. Viewers and listeners, do stay with us. We will be right back.
The process with us, the nation would be so much farther along, and the need to pursue this action today would have been avoided. Regrettably, government has refused to participate in any meaningful way, leaving GPP with no acceptable recourse other than to initiate the repurchase process. We need to protect the legal rights of GPP and its shareholders, as well as the Grenlech's exclusive right to generate, distribute, and sell electricity in Grenada was abrogated and withdrawn. Second, the term of Grenlech's license was extinguished by at least the final 31 years of its operating rights and authority. Third, Grenlech's contractually negotiated and mandated rate-making and cost recovery rules and procedures that had governed Grenlech's operations were revoked. And finally, Grenlech's exemptions from customs
And welcome back, folks. We are going to segue into the other business of the Bub Report this morning, and that is the matter of the Grenlech repurchase agreement that was settled in an arbitration dispute between the Government of Grenada and WRB Enterprises. But before we get to our panel this morning, one of the things that I really will be advocating for is for there to be legislation enacted in Grenada for a Freedom of Information Act. I think it's important that whenever these issues occur, that the people of the country should have a right to know what the government is doing with respect to these arrangements. And so, as a journalist, I'm calling for the government to, in essence, enact a Freedom of Information Act. Every democratic society has a Freedom of Information Act in place, and that will be one of the causes that I would be advocating for in the new year. But I want to take this opportunity to welcome our guests this morning. I have Ms. Claudette Joseph, who is the current Public Relations Officer of the National Democratic Congress. I also have another Joseph, Mr. Oliver Joseph, who is the current Minister of Foreign Affairs. Mr. Joseph, you're busy guy. Happy New Year to you. And I also have, from another period in Grenadian history, Mr. Finsley St. Louis, who was the former Minister of Communications and Works under the first National Democratic Congress administration of Sir Nicholas Brathwaite. Incidentally, Mr. St. Louis was also part of the initial negotiating team that engaged with the divestment of Grenlech to an international firm. So let us get to it. Mr. St. Louis, first of all, and to the rest of you, Happy New Year and welcome to the Bub Report.
Happy New Year to you, Kelon.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, so Mr. St. Louis, I would begin with you. You were part of the government negotiating team that concluded the initial share purchase agreement with WRB in 1994. In hindsight, Mr. St. Louis, would you conclude that Grenada was lowballed with that sale?
Well, the truth is, Kelon, there were certain aspects of the agreement that I had certain problems with. And one of them was that I felt it was necessary for us to have reviews on the purchase rather than give a complete period of time and not have reviews. Because at that time, solar power was being spoken of, but not really enacted worldwide. And as a result, I thought it would have been necessary for every 5 or 10 years within the contract agreement that we should have had reviews. My colleagues did not really agree with me. But that is one of the things that I thought was very important.
So in essence, you are admitting that the previous NDC government entered into a problematic arrangement with WRB, which tied the hands of the government. Mr. St. Louis?
Well, at that time, this is how I personally felt, that we should have had reviews. But my guys did not agree, and so I did not, in Parliament actually, I did not vote for the agreement. I did put a motion in Parliament, and I was supported by Ben Jones. We spoke at length at it, but somehow we didn't have the numbers, and it was not clear to my colleagues what I was really trying to get at. And so the vote went through for the agreement as it stands.
Okay, now with respect to the current Minister of Communications and Works, your successor, Gregory Bowen, now the Wall report wasn't exactly too kind to Mr. Bowen with respect to his management of the utility company in the 90s. His mismanagement was laid bare in that report. But Mr. St. Louis, you were also the line minister for Grenlech at the time. And so it can be argued that you enabled, some may say that you enabled his bad behavior by keeping him on as the minister.
Well, let me say this.
As the manager, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, let me say this. In the government that we took over from, that was the original NNP, there was an inquiry into Grenlech and Minister Bowen's management. The lawyer we had was Walker, Linus Walker, and that is who the original NNP had taken to do the inquiry. He was there for many months. Bowen was at home and being paid. There was no way that we were getting the report. I was asking for the report. It was not coming from Walker. So I went back because at that time we were under load shedding. And I might say to you that I had not been able to get a night rest, a complete night rest. 2 hours perhaps I used to sleep, because at that time there was load shedding all over the island. We did not have a system that worked. Young Pursu was at the time managing, and there was nothing to work with actually. And Bowen was out there. He had more experience obviously with the plant. And he was out there getting paid, but waiting on an inquiry that was not complete. And so I went back to my colleagues and I said, look, we might as well do something about it. Let's get Bowen back. And in the meantime, I was suggesting, and I believe I might have been the one who said, we need to get rid of this plant and find somebody or group that can run the plant, because we could not have continued to exist in Grenada with the level of electricity services that we were given.
Right, which was inefficient, really. You're talking.
It was absolutely inefficient, absolutely at the time. There was absolutely nothing. Even Boeing could not have made it work, and it was impossible. The engines were all run down, and there was really nothing to work with.
Okay.
So
yeah, go ahead.
The decision to sell it was unanimous among all of us. It was unanimous in the parliament, and as a matter of fact, the whole of Grenada, I believe at the time, was glad when we said we need to look for someone to invest in this and to make it work.
Okay, now I'm going to bring in Claudette. You are part of the current NDC executive. Now, Ms. Joseph, first of all, welcome to the Burb Report.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Again,
good morning to you and everyone viewing.
Correct. Now, if the NDC, in an alternate universe, the NDC, had the government today, what would you have done differently with respect to the Grenlech deal as it was constituted? Is your party okay with an agreement that, in essence, tied the government's hands with respect to introducing competition into the energy sector in Grenada? At least that is the argument that comes from the other side.
Well, you ask 2 questions. The first is, what would the NDC have done differently? We would have engaged WRB. We have an agreement in place. It is backed by an act of parliament. The agreement is clear. And so whether or not certain aspects of it are deemed favorable, what an NDC administration today would have done would be to work with WRB, who at all times, the arbitration award and all the information that I have gathered suggests were willing to revisit the agreement and to renegotiate, particularly to include more areas of renewable energy. And so, first of all, rather than trigger a breach of the agreement, which would force a repurchase at a price that our economy could ill afford at this time, we would have been more amicable and acted in good faith with WRB, who are heavily invested here and who have said repeatedly that they did not want to go. So we would have worked with them to renegotiate the arrangement and revisit certain aspects of it. As Mr. St. Louis said, when the agreement was struck in 1994, renewable energy was not such a big issue at the time. It wasn't a topical matter. In fact, the objections to the contract at the time did not include an argument relating to inadequate renewable energy provisions. The NDC administration in 2011, November 2011 to be exact, with the assistance of the Organization of American States, established an energy policy. It is still there. It was shelved when the administration lost the elections 14 months later. But that energy policy was framed and developed with the full cooperation of Grenlech. And in fact, pursuant to that energy policy, certain steps were already taken, including 2 contracts for the generation of wind energy, one in Carriacou and one in River Antoine, exploration in relation to geothermal energy at Mount St. Catherine. There was a geologist, Grenadian expert based in Germany, who was recruited and was here for about 2 years working on that aspect of things. And so Grenlech and the Government of Grenada were in fact working to enhance the energy sector in Grenada. That was all scuttled after the 2013 elections. So we would have done, first of all, we would not have put Grenada in the position of having to find US $63 million in these very difficult times, or at all, to repurchase the shares as ordered by the tribunal when government lost the case. First of all, an NDC administration would not have taken it down that route.
Well, I mean, so and let us bring in Minister Joseph here. Minister Joseph, thank you so much. A lot has been laid at the feet of your government. I want to give you the chance to respond to a number of things that Ms. Joseph and Mr. St. Louis just said with respect to the current situation.
Thank you very much for allowing me to be on the show.
Mm-hmm.
And Happy New Year to the panelists and all your viewers. Let me go straight to the fact. The NP government in 1994 never opposed the sale. What we opposed was the agreement, in the share purchase agreement, which gave 80 years with no review. And Mr. St. Louis is very honest and forthright about that, and I admire him for that. We have to be honest. And there are a number of clauses there that will trigger repurchase. Do you know that if a hurricane came and destroyed everything, Grenlech could say that we have to repurchase it? Do you know that if we pass legislation that changed any aspect? So what we did, what caused us to be where we are today? We have said that under the current monopoly arrangement, it is stifling the growth of the economy. Businesses cannot invest because we have one of the highest rate of electricity in CARICOM, and that can be checked and verified. We engage WRB with respect to renewable energy and making other changes. After 26 years of operating a monopoly, there is no evidence that WRB was willing to move to renewable energy and to open the sector to independent power producers. No evidence of that, because they have an agreement which gave them the sole right to do it. And as a policy decision, we decide as a government, we cannot continue. We have 26 years and nothing has changed. Therefore, we will move as a sovereign government to pass legislation to open and regulate the sector for competition. And we said to WRB, we like them to stay and participate. We said that to them. We enter negotiations, we engage them. I and the former Attorney General Kajitan Hood went to Miami to meet WRB. And then the dead team came to Grenada, engaged them fully and said, listen, we want you to stay in Grenada. You are a very reliable supplier of electricity, but we need to open the sector and regulate it. So we introduced the Public Utilities Regulatory Commission, the commission that will set rate. That was not in the agreement. Grenlech set the rate and a formula that was set there. And then the worst part of it, you have Schedule 2 and the share purchase agreement, which if you trigger a repurchase, you have to pay them under a formula. They're nothing to do with fair market value, absolutely nothing. Dr. Mitchell and Dr. Raphael Fletcher at the time pointed it out, said, listen, gentlemen, that formula you are agreeing today with is not in the interest of any government. So you should not agree to this formula. Yet they went ahead and signed the share purchase agreement with that formula in there. So WRB, we tried to settle with them. They decide we did not make any headway, and therefore they decide they are going to arbitration tribunal. So we got to the arbitration tribunal because of an agreement that was signed that every person who looked at it, we gave accountants, lawyers, economists to look at it, and they cannot believe what they are reading in the document. And therefore, in the interest of the population, we have decided that if Grenlech decide to go to arbitration, the arbitration tribunal rule, that is a repurchase agreement, it is now a state asset. It belongs to the state. I've seen some of your friends changing position when a certain period of time.
So some of my friends, I don't know.
They say,
I don't know what you're talking about.
They say, yes, the government should control electricity. No, the government gets it. They say, no, we shouldn't put it back. Listen, they take a principled position. Grenlech did what they have to do. With this, the arbitration tribunal has ruled. After the ruling, we entered into negotiations with WRB. After the ruling, remember, the ruling was for $75 million for 50% shares. During the negotiations after the settlement, which I was involved in, they had 11.6% shares. So we are getting 61.6% shares for 63 million, as opposed to 75 million for 50%. Yeah. That is what we're getting. The settlement for 63, we paid 60 million and signed a promissory note to pay the other 3 million US in 2 years' time. Because we did not have all the money. We could not raise the 63. We were able to come up with 60. They said, okay, sign a promissory note and you will pay in 2 years' time. That is the settlement that we agreed.
Claudette,
Yes.
I would bring you in here. I will give you a chance
Yes.
to respond. I see you nodding. I see Finsley also nodding there. Claudette, I will start with you.
Now, first of all, let me tell you this, Kellon, and the viewers. There are facts, there are historical facts, and then there is political spin. What we are hearing from the current administration is a lot of political spin that deviate starkly from the historic facts as recorded in various independent sources. The first of these facts are, the first is rather, in 1994, when the arrangement with WRB was entered into, Grenada was also at the time under a structural adjustment program. That's fact one. Fact two, as you heard Mr. St. Louis, who was then in government, say here today, he said that there was nothing in Grenlech. There was nothing. It was flat in terms of equipment, in terms of management, in terms of reliability, because Gregory Bowen and company wrecked it while Dr. Mitchell was minister.
But
Right?
Ms. Joseph, at the same time, there was a line minister responsible for the management of Grenlech as well. So you're telling me that
Listen, the line minister at the time when this report was commissioned, this is the Warren report, when it was commissioned, the line minister was Dr. Keith Mitchell. The report was published in March of 1991. The National Democratic Congress came into office in 1990. I think it was around June 1990. So this report was issued less than a year after the NDC came into office. So there wasn't an inordinate delay in the Mr. Warren issuing his report.
Okay.
And the report is clear as to what state Gregory Bowen had Grenlech in.
Okay, please proceed. Go ahead. Yes.
Secondly, from the time Grenlech, the company, was set up in Grenada in 1960, it was a monopoly. So this argument that is being made that WRB was given a monopoly is insincere, because Grenlech was always the sole supplier and distributor of electricity, generator and distributor of electricity in Grenada. So the monopoly was always in existence as a company. All right? In fact, what caused it to be in such a state is because it was a monopoly run entirely by the state. What the arrangement in 1994 did, it retained the monopoly, yes, but it spread the shareholding across a number of people, including government and ordinary Grenadians, and WRB, who brought in their expertise and transformed the company to what we know it today. The next point Minister Joseph mentioned is that a hurricane, he uses an example, certain things will trigger a repurchase event under the share purchase agreement. That's correct. We had a devastating hurricane in 2004 in Hurricane Ivan. It didn't trigger a repurchase agreement. In that circumstance, they didn't say repurchase the shares because everything is flat on the ground. In fact, one of the things that was set up in Grenlech after WRB came in was a hurricane relief fund, where a certain portion of the profits was set aside every year, and the hurricane relief fund was tapped into to rebuild after Hurricane Ivan. Right? What we have here, Kellon, is a reckless enterprise pursued principally by Mr. Gregory Bowen since he was fired from Grenlech in about 1994. Sorry, 1996 or thereabout, right? Now, the arbitration award found that the repurchase event was when Government of Grenada breached its contract with WRB and passed the Electricity Supply Act.
So stick a pin there, Ms. Joseph,
Yes.
because now are you suggesting then that government does not have the sovereign right to go to the parliament and pass legislation that it deemed fit for the execution of policy initiatives?
Government, listen to me.
Yeah,
Let me
because
answer.
yes,
Let me answer.
go ahead.
Let me answer you this.
Yes.
For example, the minister mentioned the renewable sources of energy, right? There is absolutely nothing in the share purchase agreement between WRB and Government of Grenada that prevented the government from pursuing a policy of renewable energy.
That's right.
Nothing.
But
In fact,
again, the policy is not only about, no, stick a pin. The policy is not only about renewable energy, but the policy is about ensuring that there can be a liberalized sector, in the words of the government, that there can be competition in the energy sector. In their
well,
words, it's about ensuring that you have other entrants to the market. So how do you respond to that
well,
claim?
there's a lot of talk. I mean, you can liberalize the sector, but it's how you do it, right? Because let me tell you something. Let's take our neighbor, Trinidad, for example. Trinidad and Tobago has a population of 1.3 million people. They have one energy company. Let's go further. New York has a population of about 9 million people. They have one energy company. Not New York, not the whole state of New York. The city of New York area.
The boroughs, the 5 boroughs,
Right.
yeah.
They have one energy company. So when you're talking about liberalizing, you have to consider whether you're talking about liberalizing in a way that will basically kill Grenlech, or whether you're talking about liberalizing using renewable sources of energy so that private entities can generate electricity and work in consort with Grenlech, right? So that there's a win-win situation for all.
Well,
And in fact, Kellogg,
yes, go ahead.
in
I'm
fact,
going to get the minister to respond. I know he's
yes, in
chomping at
fact,
the bit there.
well, he can laugh
Yeah.
because he knows I'm speaking the truth. In fact, that was already in place, set up in 2010 thereabout. We all know people in Grenada, for example, who have solar electricity panels on their roofs. And how does that work? They generate electricity, and there was no breach of the Electricity Supply Act. People were able to use the solar energy to generate electricity. They use their own, they sell the excess to Grenlech, or they sold all to Grenlech and then purchase electricity like the rest of us. This is in existence already. So this notion that the monopoly only allowed Grenlech alone to generate electricity, we all know that that's not true, because we all know people who are generating their own electricity and feeding the excess to the grid. That has been in place since 2010 thereabouts. In relation to cheaper rates, to Grenlech being the most expensive in terms of rates in the Caribbean. Here's what the tribunal say about that. The tribunal says at paragraph 132 of its judgment, in response to this allegation, the claimants called Dr. Boaz Moselle, who testified that rates in Grenada were consistent with Caribbean markets generally, especially those which operate without government subsidies. The respondent's experts, the respondent was the government, Robert Mudge compared Grenada's rates with US rates, an exercise which the tribunal considers unhelpful. So the tribunal accepted the evidence of the expert, Mr. Moselle, preferred by Grenlech, who established that our rates are on par with the rest of the Caribbean islands. What brings up our rate marginally over some islands is the taxes. Added to that, the electricity rate under the share purchase agreement is settled and agreed by the Minister of Finance, or Minister of Energy rather, under the share purchase agreement. So this is all a lot of propaganda and spin. Obviously, it did not work. That's why the government lost so badly, because you don't go with propaganda and spin before a court or a tribunal. You go with evidence and facts, which is why what they're trying to feed us, and may work with some, did not sell to the tribunal.
Okay, Minister Joseph, I'll give you a chance to respond. A lot was said there.
Yeah, a lot was said, and I would appreciate if I get the same amount of time.
You absolutely will. I'm not going to rob you of that time.
As if you notice, I do not interrupt when any presenter
you don't, and that is why we always welcome you here.
Yes,
but
I listen.
Let us get to the. Let us get.
So let us get it.
Respond.
One, regardless of how the NBC want to put it over, the people are not foolish. The share purchase agreement is the worst agreement ever seen. The worst share purchase agreement anywhere in the world. People ask us who signed that. And it is that share purchase agreement that caused us to be where we are today. Regarding the monopoly, well, anyway, because Grenlech was a monopoly owned of 100% by government, the point I made is that you sold majority share to a single company and transfer the monopoly from government to a private company. I want you to dispute that. That is the point I make. This private company got 61.6% of the shares. So you move from a government monopoly to a private monopoly. So there is no denying that they have monopoly for 80 years. That's a fact. You want to deal with facts? That's a fact. The other fact is to generate solar power, you have the excess must be sold to Grenlech. And then the price they pay for it and what they sell it back for is controlled by Grenlech, not by the Public Utilities Regulatory Commission. No, the Public Utilities Regulation Commission will regulate the price at which independent power producers will produce. And if they have to sell to the company, the price will be set. And the price that will be sold, that will also be set by the Public Utilities Regulatory Commission, which never existed under the share purchase agreement. Now, regarding to hurricane, all I said is that if there is a hurricane, they gave them the option. If they choose not to exercise the option, the thing is that they had that option. You gave them that option in the share purchase agreement. You then decided not to use it because they can get help from the Caribbean utilities to build back up power very quickly, and they decide not to exercise. That's an option that they have. We are saying why, in all these terms and conditions, as a sovereign government, you cannot pass act to regulate the supply of electricity in your country, because if you do that, you violate this terrible share purchase agreement and therefore trigger repurchase. That is what we are saying. That is why we are in that situation today.
But Minister Joseph, I would stick a pin there though. Going back to the actual ratifying of the agreement, that agreement had to be ratified by the NNP government.
Thank you.
Right, in 1996. Now, the NNP government at the time, you were still a public servant at the time. You were not part of the government. But there are some who might say that, well, you had a chance to look at that problematic agreement that was put in place and renegotiate that agreement before ratifying it with WRB. But that was also not done. Minister Joseph, what say you?
Listen, that was, I said to you, that the NFP government, philosophically, not against privatization. I said that, and it is in the Hansard report, the contribution by Dr. Mitchell when it went to Parliament. We said you can have a private company running it, but the terms and conditions under which you put it on is what we disagree with. Right? So we ratified the agreement to move on and said, okay, well, we study the agreement in more details. When it comes to implementation, then we will engage Grenlech. So over the years, we have engaged Grenlech, and we have not seen any change in 26 years. So what gives us any comfort that they will change and open up the sector? They make monopolistic profits. If I am the private company, I love that. Why would I allow renewable energy and geothermal energy and everything when I'm using fossil fuel and making super profits? And what happened to the profits? The profit, 61% of the profit go back to WRB, not to Grenadians. Now the profits will go to Grenadians because it's now a state asset, and it will go to the Grenadian public. So all these 26 years of profit just went back to the company and taken out of Grenada and not reinvested into the country.
Well, I mean, the last part of that argument about not reinvesting the country, that can be contested. Minister Claudette, I'll give you a chance to respond.
I just wanted, just one thing, yes. I have in my hand here an extract from the parliamentary debates, the parliamentary Hansard, dated 4th February 1997. And this is the debate in the Senate on the Grenlech share purchase agreement. And this is 1997, when Prime Minister Mitchell was the Prime Minister. Recall that in the 1995 elections, the sale of Grenlech was a big campaign issue. Prime Minister Mitchell won that election in large measure on the platform that he was going to redo this bad deal that he claimed the NDC had struck. In fact, the outgoing NDC administration gave Dr. Mitchell a full and free hand to do so. Because what happened is that Prime Minister Braffett said, we will not finalize and ratify this agreement until after the elections. The agreement was reached in September 1994. And the NDC administration determined that they would not finalize and ratify because it was getting so much criticism from the then opposition New National Party. Prime Minister Mitchell won the elections and in fact went to Parliament and got parliamentary approval to renegotiate the agreement with WRB. And I am reading here the resolution of the Parliament of Dr. Mitchell. The Senate, it says, be it resolved that this House expresses concern about the findings of the Commission relating in particular to the sale of Grenlech, because they set up a commission, They set up a commission as soon as they won the elections. They could not believe that Sister Joan Purcell and company, and they couldn't believe that an under the table deal wasn't done. So they set up a commission. And so this is the commission they're speaking about here. So be it resolved that this Honorable House expresses concern about the findings of the commission relating to in particular to the sale of Grenlech, and that the House endorses the decision of government to take early steps to ensure that the terms of the sale of the shares in the Grenada Electricity Services Limited negotiated by the immediate past administration are renegotiated by the government in the best interest of the government and people of Grenada. The question is, honorable senators, that this motion be approved. And hear how the Senate voted. They asked for a division. So each senator voted independently. Senator Lawrence Joseph, aye. Senator Gregory Boyle, aye. Senator Jocelyn Whiteman, aye. Senator Patrick Bob, aye. Senator Roger Radix, aye. Senator Elvin Nimrod, aye. Senator Carlyle Glean, no. Senator Glean was a NDC senator. Senator Livingston Nelson, abstain. He was an NDC senator. Senator Ann Peters, absent. She was an NDC senator. Senator Dudley Andrews, absent. Senator Chester Humphrey, most definitely aye. So the NNP administration got approval from the parliament on 4th February 1997 to renegotiate this bad deal. Guess what? They tried, they failed because they could not do better. The company wasn't as valuable then as it was now. So it was in fact
I mean,
a
but
good
it was
deal
it was also sold for a paltry sum, but that's another issue. We will take a
because it
break
was
and
a
we'll be right
powerful
back.
company at the time.
We will take a break. We'll be right back.
And it is not the sale per se, Mr. Speaker, but the conditions under which it was sold. Because we all like private sector to run things. But if you allow the private sector to run it without the regulatory arm, consumers will suffer. The company, WRB, won the bid for 50%. They paid $15 million. When there were other companies who were offering more. With the $15 million they got, they had to take some money out of it, buy a generator. They had to take some money out of it, put for the workers. So what the state ended up with was less than 9 point something million dollars out of the 50 for Grenlech. That is what the state ended up with, Mrs.
Competition was, the market was opened up and allowed. The prices are still higher than what we have in Grenada right now. And Dominica also has hydro, and yet still in an open market there where competition is allowed. And I'll tell you what happened in Dominica too. I was there. A lot of people came in first when they heard it, when they looked and realized that, you know, what the resident power company was producing at, they realized that they could not beat that price, and they just simply backed away from it. So a lot of people will come, will look at it. So look in Jamaica also. Jamaica has over 100 megawatts of renewables. Jamaica has about 3 other that I can think of. There might be more. Jamaica has about 3 other what we call IPPs, independent power producers, who are in the market competing. And the price in Jamaica has not dropped.
Since losing that seat, what have you been up to?
Now, Mr. Attorney General, this particular provision sounds unconstitutional. But why were there not consultations before moving forward with the proposals? Did they say what will happen when you guys get to St. Vincent? Because there are pressing socio-economic issues that I would want to address with you. In the hyper-information age of social media, the Bub Report knows there is more on Facebook and YouTube. Folks, welcome back. I would give Minister Joseph equal time to respond. I feel as if I'm in the speaker's chair in Parliament here. But Minister Joseph, I'll give you a chance to respond and to rebut some of the claims. And then we want to get to what we want to get to really is to also talk about the 63 million and source of funds for the financing of the repurchase. But Mr. Joseph, I'll give you a chance to respond first, and then I'll get Mr. St. Louis as well to come in. Yes.
The resolution called for the new National Party to renegotiate with WRB, and therefore we engaged over the years with WRB. Even when I got into government, we continued this engagement. Even when we passed the Electricity Supply Act, to regulate the sector. The Attorney General and myself, Mr. Cadgington Hood, went up to the United States to have talks with some mediators, some neutral persons, and then the team came down to Grenada. So the resolution seek to us to renegotiate it. That is exactly what we did. So if we were not successful, it's not that we failed the resolution, because WRCB claimed that these are the conditions under which they pay the $15 million for. And therefore, any change to it, they must agree to it. Government cannot unilaterally take any action. So we entered into our negotiations, and there were inflexibility, and it was not successful. So it's not correct to say that we did not engage in negotiations with the company. Because as I mentioned in my opening, we have said to WRB, we would like them to stay and participate in the local economy, but that we like to see other independent power producers as well coming in. The New Zealand government funded a study for geothermal energy, which shows great potential. And that is an area we would like to move into because it is a cheaper source of energy. And therefore you will see movement in that direction very soon, because the studies have been very detailed and done
Lend
with
me a pen
assistance with
and a piece of
experts
paper.
from New Zealand. So it is not that we have not engaged, but we are here where we are today because WRB decided to go to arbitration. We lost the arbitration case, and therefore the award had to be fulfilled, because if we did not fulfill the award, they can then take actions in the local court in Grenada, which, by the way, they registered to do, the local court, to garnish government account, to seize government property, in order to get payment. Because remember, the ruling came out in March, and up to the end of October, there was no payment made. So they decided to go to the local court and file the matter in the local courts in Grenada so that they can get the money by seizing government assets and garnishing government's account. And for all that was over the government's head because of this share purchase agreement that was signed that gave them exclusive right. And therefore government was in a position where it cannot take certain action, cannot even liberalize the sector. We cannot establish a public utilities regulatory commission to set up it. And we just could not continue like that. And therefore we moved in the direction where to liberalize the sector, and that will bring benefit to the people of Grenada. That is what we have done.
Okay, Mr. St. Louis, you've been there waiting in the wind. I want to give you a chance to respond and react to a number of claims that were made here this afternoon in Grenada.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually, what I see is that we have lost on the basis that what we had was not run properly. We got an organization that came in and did put things in such a way that Grenadians were getting regular, good electricity supply. The fact is, the rates might have been high, but like Claudette pointed out, there are persons who have their own electricity supply from using sun power and sell it back to the grid. And I know of one who have been generating their own electricity using sun power. And like he said to me, he was only paying something like $5 a month. No, something like $10 a month, just to be able to have the opportunity to use the system. However, he was generating electricity and had electricity in his house on 24 hours if he needed it, and it was not costing him more than $10 or $15 a month, because he was feeding back to the grid, and because of that service, he had to pay a certain price to enable him to do this. Now, if that is the case, it meant that several organizations could have, under the present circumstance or conditions, use the opportunity to do the same thing. But Grenada is a small population, and to open the industry for several generating suppliers to come in, it would be impossible. So the fact is, if we had approached, I believe if we had approached WRB in a way in which we could have gotten things changed. I have spoken to I've spoken to the directors on the other side, on WRB. I've spoken to some of the WRB personnel. It is the attitude, I believe, that the government had used, and the behavior is what brought us to where we are. My concern here is we could have done, if you want to do geothermal, fine. We could have asked them to let us look at all the possibilities. And I believe that WRB would have been willing to look at those possibilities rather than the hostile attitude that was taken.
But Mr. St. Louis, it would appear that is giving deference to a company, saying that, well, let's go to the company to determine our public policy. The government also has a right to create public policy for what it would deem appropriate for the energy sector. Indeed,
I agree. But we have to look at the cost. Let us look at what is happening, what we have now. Look at the population size. Is it possible for us to allow an open market for the generation of electricity by companies to sell to those who do not have? You think that would have been possible for this population size? We have to take these things into consideration. And you have a company that is generating electricity and is giving us a proper service. In fact, as far as I am concerned, the service has been very good. Grenadians have been able to live with it. True, you would have been able to probably reduce it. And I think if we were able to get there and talk in a particular manner without hostility to WRB, we would have been able to do it. And then let us look at who ratified the agreement. The agreement was ratified by the same government that tried to had became hostile to the organization. The attitude, and I believe that we could have done better remaining with the WRB rather than trying to take the company from them or going the way we went. And now we have found ourselves in a state where we have taken back something. And I remember, and I want to go there, because the minister in the press conference a few days ago, he said that the equipment there are getting obsolete. He didn't say it in that way, but it strikes me that the equipment that we have now are not in the best state. Would they find the money to put new equipment in there, having just had to pay $63 million US for the company as it is now? Where are we going to get the money? My concern,
yes, go ahead.
My serious concern is what has happened here in terms of the money being paid, in my opinion, much too much money paid. And at the same time, we would have to have monies to equip the company later down the line. How soon, perhaps, if we continue to remain in government's hand, how soon would we start to have load shedding again? That is my concern.
Okay, so Mr. Thomas, Mr. St. Louis, you preempted a question that I actually had for Minister Joseph. Now, Minister Joseph, in the government's press conference last week with yourself and Minister Bowen, you suggested that funds were reallocated from the capital side of the budget to refinance to finance this repurchase. Now, Minister, I believe the government is required to go back to Parliament in accordance with the 2015 Public Finance Management Act. Now, the Act says, and I'm quoting from the Act, in Section 17, subsection 2, that Cabinet may, if it is satisfied that it is in the public interest, which the Grenlech repurchase is a public interest matter, and with the approval of the House of Representatives, authorize the minister to purchase securities, shares, in any public company with money from the consolidated fund. Now, Minister Joseph, in your press conference last week, you gave no indication that you went back to Parliament to obtain this approval for such a major buyback. So again, the question is, where did the source of funds come from to finance this purchase?
As explained by the Minister of Finance, when the capital budget, so we're talking about the 2020 capital budget now, right?
Mm-hmm.
So expenditure were approved in Parliament for capital expenditure on a number of projects. Due to the lockdown and the COVID situation, expenditure in a number of areas did not take place, the capital side. And therefore, when we had to meet the payment, we looked through these savings from the capital budget and realized that we cannot reach the 63 million, but the most we could come up with is 60 million US, and offer that as a payment upfront, 60 million for all the shares. The 3 million remaining, we were given 2 years to pay the additional 3 million. However, all the shares were transferred for the 60 million US dollars that came from the capital side. Now, your quote, the Public Finance Management Act says that if we have to pay a debt, so you could also look at it from the other view, that it is a debt, a court ruling. So the arbitration tribunal rule for a payment that the government has to make. And therefore, in the settlement of this debt payment to Grenlech can be seen in this light. You see, you refer to the purchase of a capital asset. So while it is purchase a capital asset, it was fulfilling a judgment of a court. And in fulfillment of the judgment of the court, that money was used under the capital side of the budget to fulfill that obligation of a court ruling.
Okay, but you say that, which again, that is a fair point. But do you have a line by line summary of what specific areas in that capital budget? Now, I'm actually looking at the document. I'm having some difficulties with sharing the budget and financing summary from the 2020 budget. The budget is summarized as follows from 2020, and I'm quoting now. Recurrent revenue, 786.2 million. Recurrent expenditure, 633.7 million. And then capital expenditure, 225.3 million. So I think what people are concerned about is whether or not, what specific areas from that capital budget were used to finance that purchase. That's the
right. So
yes.
Yeah, sure. No, that's a fair question. We asked the Ministry of Finance team to go through every line item on the capital side to see where you had savings and see how much money you can come up with. So the Ministry of Finance team went through every capital budget line by line and submitted to the cabinet the 60 million US savings that we can advance. That is what.
When was this submitted to cabinet?
I don't recall the exact date, but it was before the 24th, because the settlement had to be made before the 24th.
Before the
All
24th,
the closing
yes.
had to be done by the 29th.
Correct.
It was before the 24th, yes.
Okay. Okay. So again, Minister Joseph, I'm hoping I can get some kind of, and this is why we need to have a Freedom of Information Act so that we can see those things. But Ms. Joseph, I'll give you a chance to respond. Go ahead.
Yeah. I just want to say, we all know that the Constitution is the.
You are breaking up there. She's breaking up there.
Yeah, I'm not hearing her at all.
Yeah. Yeah. Ms. Joseph.
The whole thing keeps breaking up.
Yeah. Yeah, you're breaking up. If you can log off and log.
Any spending.
Yeah. Okay, she's breaking up.
I hope
but Minister Joseph,
Am I on?
We can't hear you. Yes, go ahead. Go ahead. Let's see if we can. Go ahead. Go ahead, Claudette. Okay, Claudette is breaking up really badly there. But Minister Joseph, you can understand.
I'm saying.
Yeah. You can understand the concern that people have. Now, I have some other questions here coming in from the public. Dixie and Purcell says, so now the administration should have no problem paying the teachers and police their gratuity, since it seems like we have money saved, but not used in the proper way.
So we do not have, very simple answer.
Yes.
We do not have money saved on the recurrent side. Payment of salaries are the recurrent expenditure. Once you make it, if you increase the wage bill by 13.4 million and increase salaries by 4%, you have to pay that every month. And on the recurrent side, there was a deficit. So there was no savings on the recurrent side, rather there was a deficit because we spent extra money on the recurrent side to meet COVID expenditure. So that's two different expenditure. Whereas we found the money on the capital side, there were no savings on the recurrent side.
Okay, so in other words, what you're saying is, and what I'm inferring from what you're saying is that wage negotiation matters with respect to payment of public servants, matters with respect to payments that are owed to aggrieved parties from the government. So, for example, we have folks like Gemma Bain Thomas, Dorset Charles, who are owed by the government. Those things come from the recurrent side of the budget. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So, and then for the capital side of the budget, I'm just trying to understand why the Grenlech deal could not have also come from the recurrent side as opposed from the capital side.
Yes, but under the Public Finance Management Act, there are strict rules governing capital expenditure and recurrent expenditure. And therefore, the purchase of an asset like Grenlech is not recurrent because you make a one-off payment. One-off, 60 million, that's it. Recurrent means every month you must meet it, every month. But to make a one-off purchase of asset, it is done on the capital side of the budget. Like if we have to build a bridge, we build a bridge for $250,000, that's it. It's not recurring. You build 25 miles of road, spend 100 million, that's it, one-off, no recurrent. The recurrent side simple means that expenditure you must meet on a monthly or quarterly and a recurring basis. That's why it's called recurrent expenditure.
Okay, Claudia, let's see if we can get you back here.
Okay. I need to move to my computer battery is going there. I need to move to a next location.
You need to get all right. So you go do that. Yes. Go ahead, Claudette. Okay, we seem to be having some technical issues with Ms. James's connection. Claudette, can you hear us? You might need to log off, Claudette, and log back on.
Yes, right? I'm hearing you.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, but I'm hearing you though. Yes, I see Minister Joseph is gone.
Yeah, please proceed. No, he's here.
Yes.
He's not dodging you. No.
What? No, I'm not saying he is.
I'm here.
What I'm saying is that we have Section 77 of the Constitution, which requires to table in the Parliament all expenditure. Now, this expenditure is a massive one. From the figure quoted by the minister there, that represents about of the capital budget for 2020. Said was or so million. So that is almost all capital budget for 2020. Now I can't for the life of me understand how is it that up to today the government cannot say which project these funds were drawn from, which project was allocated for in the 2020 budget and not executed because of COVID or some other reason, and therefore the allocation. That suggests to me what we are getting is not an accurate or truthful explanation as to the source funds. And that is why it is important to have such things as freedom of information provisions of the Constitution of Grenada. Because an expense such as the payment for these shares or compliance with the judgment of tribunal ought to, not should, have been provided for. And we should
Okay, so folks, we will take a break and we will be right back. Minister, stay with us.
Oh, hold on.
The blackouts that we had 35 years ago, what we have changed Grenlech and what Grenlech has become a first-class international reputed company giving us high-quality service, ensuring the energy security, the electrical security of our country, and we're going right back there. It's almost deja vu.
All right? So we see at a time when, look, let us also recall that it was the same Minister Bowen and Dennis Campbell who took decisions without approval from the board of directors to purchase all kinds of equipment, only to realize after, putting in a container, that the crankshaft of one of those generators was damaged, it rusted, it was not operable. And so they had to send to have it repaired at additional costs. That's the kind of thing that was happening under the management of Minister Gregory Bowen and Mr. Dennis Campbell. Now it is also to note as an aside that Mr. Dennis Campbell, in the same Warren report, was the gentleman who wrecked CWC. In fact, the commission found that the man was arrogant, he was abusive to staff, and was not cooperative with the commission. It is all in the Warren report, and I'm asking people to please read it.
Okay, folks, we are about to wrap up here. We're having some technical issues. Minister Joseph, you're about to wrap up, so can you kindly come back on camera? We're seeing you on the side here. We're about to wrap up.
Yeah, sure. I will come back, as I said.
Yes.
I moved location to charge.
Yeah.
As the battery went low.
Right. Well, I hope Grenlech is giving you some juice there. Now that it's a state entity.
I get it. Because it's the first time I've been so long. It's the first time I've been so long on your program. So I thought it would end by 12.
That is true. Yeah, but I guess because of the nature of the discussion.
Yes,
you know,
so no problem. If you want to wrap up, no problem.
Yes. But Mr. St. Louis, I will give you the chance to really reflect on where we go from here, because I think a lot of folks are concerned that there is not a lot of sunlight here, or not a lot of accountability and transparency with respect to how this arrangement went down. So, Mr. St. Louis, I will give you a chance to reflect.
Well, I am very concerned because I am of the opinion that the government having taken back the shares from Grenlech, from WRB, to run the company and taking it in the condition in which the Minister Bowen said it is in, and the machines are in, I am of the opinion that we are going back to where we came from. That is, we probably will be load shedding, because if they had to find the money to pay WRB in the region of $63 million, what arrangement have they gotten now in place to purchase new engines? Because from where I stand, I know that Grenlech was just about bringing in a new engine. We were contacted by the suppliers from my own business. And when this started happening at the level at which it's happening, I'm not hearing anything further. So it is likely that a new engine was promised. Whether it will come or not, I'm not sure. But if it will not come, it means that we are going to be going back into load shedding. That would be a matter for the government to find the required funds to fund a new engine. And that is, to me, a very important aspect of going forward with Grenlech. I have a problem with that, and I believe Grenadians ought to be knowledgeable and to know that this is one of the areas that they ought to be concerned about. Furthermore, I believe the government went there and consummated this arrangement of taking and not having given the public sufficient opportunity to be involved, to determine what they want. And I believe now that government, people who go to government seem to think that they are in charge of us. But as far as I am concerned, they go there to serve. And if a government is going to serve, they must serve letting the people know what they are doing. There are those of us who have shares in the company. We do not know what's happening, and whether the government is going to be taking it back in such a way that it's going to continue to serve the Grenadian public now as it is, or better, is left to be seen.
Okay, now, Minister, I had another question here, and this has to do with, again, and you may find that I'm really sticking on this point, but again, it has to do with this buyback. Would it be fair to say that this buyback is occurring using the cover of the Emergency Powers Act? And I just want you to stay with me here. The Fiscal Responsibility Act states clearly, the minister may order, suspend for a period not exceeding one fiscal year, fiscal rules, targets, and corrective measures under sections 7 and 8, where a natural disaster, public health epidemic, we are in the throes of a pandemic, or war, as a result of which a state of emergency is to be declared. Is there any truth to that claim that you guys are using the Emergency Powers Act as the basis for proceeding with that repurchase?
None of the above. In fact, I'm shocked that that even come to use it. That we are seeing that we have a court judgment.
Okay.
And we have to settle an arbitration award, which if we did not do by the 29th of December, will lead to the company seizing government's assets, because the ruling is clear and we have to satisfy the ruling. Right? So in terms of going forward, I understand Mr. St. Louis concerned about blockage. I'm concerned too, because Grenlech, there's no doubt, is a fact that they're a very reliable company. So what the government has stated, and I want to repeat, government has no intention of running the company. A private management company will be put in place to run the company. That's the first thing going forward. Secondly, shares will be offered to the Grenadian public. An accounting firm will be hired to do the prospectus, to determine the share value, and sell shares to the general public. Government, I repeat, has no intention of running the company, because, as Mr. St. Louis quite correctly said, when government was running it, you had blockouts, that they could not buy engine, and that would not serve the interests of Grenada to have the government running it, and therefore we will ensure that a proper management company is put in place and shares the soul to the Grenadian public. That is how it's going to move forward.
Do you currently have a prospectus of potential investors for Grenlech, and who are they?
No. What I'm saying is now that we have it back now, it's step by step, you know. On the 29th, the deal was consummated on the 29th. So
Minister Joseph, I understand that, but you guys knew that you had to get to that arrangement. So my question is, surely there must have been some thought given to who, potential investors for the company.
I said it to be sold to Grenadians. We are in touch with the World Bank. For the management company, we are in talks with the World Bank Group.
The World Bank. Okay.
Yes, the World Bank Group assisting us there. And the prospectus will be developed and shared sold to the Grenadian public.
Okay.
That is the plan. Yes.
Okay, Claudette, we were having some connection issues with you. I don't know if it's raining or whatever is happening in Grenada, but let's see if we can get you back. We're trying to wrap up, Claudette. So we want to get some closing comments from you.
Yes, it's there. Yes. It is clear that in terms of how we got where we are, government is intent on continuing to peddle the untruths and the political spin and mischief that it has engaged in for the last 26 years. And we say it is time that has been satisfied. Gregory Bowen was given free rein to pursue this vendetta, and it has been satisfied. Let us for once put the people of Grenada first, and to do what is right by the people of Grenada. In that regard, the NDC continues to call for full transparency and accountability in this matter. And we insist that the arrangements leading up to the repurchase should be made known to the public, because the government, they are servants of we the people. They are working for us. And we have a right to know how they are treating with our assets. We want that it did not originate from a third party, and that in fact it came from the coffers, as the government asserts. We also would like to know what government intends to do with these shares government intend to sell, how many of the shares they intend to keep, how many they intend to sell to any third party who would be given a block of shares. We hear a lot of fancy talk about bank and all of these things. Well, the run by a cadre of Grenadians. Grenlech comprise Grenadians who are highly trained and well qualified and able to
Okay, Ms. Joseph's connection is really bad, folks. I do apologize for that. But let me go back to Minister Joseph there. Minister Joseph, so again, fine, and this would be the final question from me. Would we be seeing any, I suppose, parliamentary legislation that puts into force? Mr. Joseph, can you hear me? You need to unmute your mic.
Yes, I'm hearing you very clear.
Yes,
very
yes.
clear.
Okay, all right. So Would there be any legislation to put into force the commitment by the government to ensure that, as you indicated, shares would be made available to the Grenadian public? What would that process look like?
I'm happy you asked that. In fact, tomorrow's cabinet meeting, we set a date for Parliament to do just what you're saying.
Okay.
Yes, at the cabinet meeting tomorrow, a date will be given very soon.
Very soon.
Oh yes.
I would love to be a fly on the wall in that cabinet meeting. Yeah?
No, well, it's simple. We have to give 7 days notice to members of Parliament, and therefore Monday when we decide, I could tell you it will be 7 days notice. So by the next Tuesday we go to Parliament. I can tell you that as of today.
Next Tuesday. Okay.
As early as that, because I'm saying 7 days notice must be given. So if you meet Monday and decide on the day, then you have to send out the notice.
Right.
See? Right. So as early as Tuesday, I'm saying, but at least no later than next week, Friday, just to ensure that everybody gets the 7 days notice. That will be done, and there will be a motion in Parliament to deal with just the question that you ask, and I'm happy you asked that.
Okay, so let's get to some quick comments here, Minister Joseph. You don't have to respond, but out of the interest of public knowledge here, someone says the Grenadian people so unfortunate. Let's see here. Let me pull that up. Okay. The Grenadian people is also the people who bought passports. So offering a select fee of the shares to the people of Grenada benefits who? Let's see. The government needs to go back to the finance team and go through line by line item and see if they can get savings to purchase one. I'm not sure what she's referring to there. Let's see. Timon Ortega says a Chinese national who buys a passport in the CBI program is a Grenadian, so look out. Ken Lewis said, you, meaning the government, found 170 million to buy the entire company and pay quote costs, but you wouldn't be able to buy an engine. Let's see. Michelson Batiste, not Michael Batiste. Remember, NNP are gatekeepers and purse holders are the Grenadian people as well. We were promised first preference in the oil and gas company as well. Then what happened? So we have some other questions. Nicodemus says renewable energy is on the minds of bigger countries. Grenadians now literally have the power in their hands. And then Jose Onesto says, I recall the administration had to go back to Parliament for a supplementary budget to support the budgets during the time the PM was finance minister. So where are all of these monies coming from? All right. So those are some of the questions. But again, Minister Joseph, the final thing, the final appeal I am making, and this is a cause that I am very passionate about as a journalist, as an academician, as a scholar. There is a need for a Freedom of Information Act in Grenada. I really think that if citizen John Public says that they want to obtain information on what government has financed or what government is budgeting, that they can file a Freedom of Information Act to get that. So, Minister Joseph, can I get a commitment from you that you can work in piloting that legislation before the Parliament?
The only commitment I can give is that I will raise it at the cabinet level.
I will be following up with you on that as well.
That's the only commitment I can give.
Okay, all right. Okay, folks, we almost out of time. We had a very spirited and important discussion here on the Burb Report. As always, this is not necessarily about getting into the weeds and the name calling and all of that. This is about attempting to get to the facts and the truth in these matters. And so that is the purpose of the Burb Report. I certainly want to thank everyone for indulging with us today. I want to thank all of my guests. I do apologize that Ms. Joseph had some connectivity issues, but I want to thank you, Mr. St. Louis, and I also want to thank you, Minister Oliver Joseph, for indulging with us today, folks. If you can stay with us, Mr. St. Louis and Mr. Joseph as well, that would be good. Just for a few minutes as we wrap up, and let me take this opportunity to thank everyone for joining us for the Bub Report today. See you next week. Bye-bye.